The ballroom was packed with foreign investors, cameras flashing, voices buzzing in Mandarin. Billionaire CEO Richard Hale stood at the podium, ready to sign the biggest deal of his career. But when his translator suddenly collapsed backstage, panic gripped the room. He couldn't understand a word. Billions were on the line. Just as the crowd grew restless, a quiet voice from the corner spoke up. Everyone turned. It was Marcus, the janitor in a faded uniform, mop still in hand. What happened next shocked the entire room. Richard Hale had built an empire from scratch: tech, energy, and global trade. But despite his power, there was one thing he never mastered: foreign languages. For this deal in Beijing, he relied heavily on his interpreter, but fate had other plans. As the investors began muttering, Richard's heart raced. If this meeting collapsed, years of work would crumble in minutes. His reputation, his empire, everything was on the line. That's when Marcus stepped forward. Marcus had worked as a janitor for 3 years. Most executives barely noticed him. But quietly, he had been listening, studying, and even practicing Mandarin during his night shifts. Nobody knew that he'd once been a linguistics student, forced to drop out of college when his family faced hardship. "Sir," Marcus said, adjusting his glasses, "I can help." The room went silent. Richard stared at him in disbelief. "You? Do you speak Mandarin?" Marcus nodded, his voice steady but humble. Fluently, the investors exchanged skeptical looks. One even laughed under his breath. But with no other option, Richard gave a desperate nod. Marcus stepped to the podium. With perfect tone and confidence, he began translating Richard's words. Gasps filled the room. The investors leaned forward, eyes wide. Every phrase Marcus delivered carried not only accuracy but nuance, the kind of cultural respect Richard's translator often missed. When one investor challenged a point aggressively, Marcus didn't flinch. He answered in Mandarin directly, with wit and grace, earning applause from the crowd. Richard watched in awe. For the first time that night, he wasn't leading the room. The janitor was. By the end of the meeting, contracts were signed, billions secured. Investors stood to shake Marcus's hand, bowing slightly, a gesture of deep respect. After the final signature, Richard turned to Marcus. The mop bucket still sat in the corner, but the man before him was no janitor. How did I not know this about you?" Richard whispered. Marcus shrugged. Nobody ever asked. Richard felt his chest tighten, not with panic this time, but with shame. He had overlooked a man with extraordinary talent simply because of his uniform. The investors gathered around, praising Marcus more than the CEO himself. For the first time in his career, Richard realized money and power couldn't buy what Marcus carried within him: resilience, brilliance, and untapped potential. The next morning, Marcus didn't report to the janitor's closet. He reported to the executive floor. Richard offered him a new position as head of international relations, with a salary that dwarfed anything Marcus had ever dreamed of. But when Richard asked what Marcus wanted most, his answer wasn't about money. "I just want people to see me. Not my job title, not my uniform, just me." That day, Richard vowed to run his company differently, to look deeper, to listen, to never underestimate anyone again. And as for Marcus, he wasn't just a translator. He became the bridge that took the company global, changing not only Richard's empire, but his heart. Because sometimes the right voice in the right moment can change everything.